Hello, welcome to the Family Values Podcast. This is once again caffeinated up jittery Joe Woods.
And once again caffeinated and crumpeted up Tom Hicks.
So, big week. Big week mainly over two big subjects. I mean, it's not really one of those weeks where we're going to be jumping around a lot.
No.
So, Parliament's been recalled. The Supreme Court basically motioned that all 11 judges motioned that the letter of prorogation to the Queen was illegal, was illegally undertaken.
Mm-hmm.
Geoffrey Cox, on the first day of Parliament being recalled, made a big screaming bitch speech.
Yeah, which is important as he was the man who gave Boris Johnson the legal advice that it was going to be okay to prorogue Parliament.
And it was one of my favourite displays of deflection and embarrassment in UK Parliament history, I think.
Oh, really?
It was. I can go on for ages about that speech. It was. There's so much to dissect there, particularly in the defensiveness of Cox, because that morning there was talks of essentially Cox falling on his sword.
Right.
But I think he somehow would manage to survive that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that he was the one who was sort of kicked off the inflammation of tempers and the. Should we say the increasing of the temperature in a room, definitely. Yeah. And the opposition took that ball and ran with it and tried to turn it against the government.
So, what's the point I was going to make? Let's just get the intro out of the way. This week's probably going to be a bit more sterile again. I don't like calling our show sterile, but it's generally... I'm thinking of moving on, because obviously last week or the week before we recorded on a Friday, and generally... Friday night, you finish work, you're more loose. We cracked open some beers. I drove over today. It's only 12 in the afternoon, so I haven't had a drink today. But, generally it's just a bit more loose and a bit more fun. Mm-hmm. I mean, as long as Tom gives me the permission, I might actually think of moving the shows to a Friday night.
Yeah, I think that would be quite good because I think we were a lot more boisterous and
funny,
more relaxed. I would say, which is I would say the main aim of this podcast was to take a less serious look at it.
So just to break the fourth wall, when me and Tom actually discussed starting this podcast a few months back, it was going to be a bit more comical than it actually is. I think what I put it down to is the time of day. And the seriousness of British politics at the moment and the ongoing events.
Yeah, there's not a lot to laugh about unless you're taking an explicitly partisan position, which we try not to do.
I mean, unless when we're laughing at people who are, and we will do this today, because today, I mean, there's so much hypocrisy on both sides this week.
Yeah.
I think more so on the kind of hard Brexit Conservative side this week. I think the hypocrisy taken towards how they look at language used by the Remain side or from the Labour benches. I think they've counted it really badly and made themselves look really stupid. But the point being, I think Friday's a good time just because we are more loose and a bit more fun. And I did listen back to the demo episode again this week and I fucking hated it.
Yeah, it's difficult to listen to.
Have you listened back to it recently?
I've not listened to it since, but I do remember cringing a lot the first time I listened to it, and listening to subsequent episodes, it flowed a lot better.
I mean, it was awkward. We didn't know what we were doing. I wouldn't shut the fuck up. You couldn't get a word in. Kind of like this diatribe to begin with right now. But anyway, we're let's get past the intro. Tom, take us away.
Okay, so we were all anticipating the legal ruling, and I think last week we avoided making speculations, and that turned out to be a good thing, because most people were wrong about the ruling, or at least when they started out, because, as you mentioned before, it was unanimous that it was unlawful for what Boris Johnson had done. And Supreme Court decisions both here and in America are very rarely unanimous, which was a real shock to a lot of people, I think.
It was interesting to see, at least from the side of the Supreme Court, the lack of partisanism in the sense that there wasn't a split vote. There was literally all 11 judges were unanimous. And obviously you have people on the more popular side who say, no, actually that shows there is more partisanism. They were totally partisan because obviously they want to block a no-deal Brexit, which is bollocks because, I mean, the court said from the start the whole point of this court is not to change the outcome of Brexit. It's just to rule whether there was illegality or not undertaken.
Yes, I think the wider ramifications are to do with our constitution, which is always evolving and has evolved more in the last couple of years than it has done, particularly in the last year, than it has done in a long time, simply because it has had to.
It's been thrown into a situation we've never been in.
Yeah, it seems that it's a very unusual and lawful ruling because they didn't exactly cite one law because there is no law on this effectively, so they were left with a legal blank space which they had to effectively rule on the spirit of the law. And they said, well, Boris Johnson didn't give a good reason, he didn't actually give any reason to the court why he prorogued Parliament, and therefore they can't say it's a justified reason, and that's now in our constitution that you have to have a justified reason to prorogue Parliament.
Which is weird when you're thinking where we're sitting now this time last week. Basically, most people were approaching it from the angle they were expecting that the whole point that he didn't give a reason as to why to prorogue Parliament would be the reason it would be passed. And actually, it's gone the wrong. It's gone the other direction. I don't want to say the wrong direction because legality, the law is the law.
I mean, just to speculate on reason why they didn't give a reason. I mean, this is the reason why the Scottish judges ruled it unlawful, because there was no reason given by the UK government, and I suspect that they were actually backed into a legal corner, because if they had given a reason, then the Gina Millers and Remain Alliances of the world would have then done everything in their power to prove that was illegal, and therefore done it on perjury.
Yeah.
So,
but that would have been a lot more complicated situation where
it would have been, which is why I think overall they had lost the argument, but they kind of cut their losses by not supplying an argument. So I think within the halls of government they kind of knew they were going to lose this one because they just got out legalese effectively.
Fucking hell. I mean, there's so much to touch on this week. Obviously, that whole Supreme ruling, we could just go on. We could just dissect that.
Yeah, but
it's impossible to dissect that without taking a semi-partisan view on that, because obviously you can start making conspiracy theories and
we're not lawyers here, so we can't really give our professional opinion.
No.
All we can do is sort of read what has happened and
essentially agree with it, because apparently it's legality.
Yeah, well, that's one thing which I think that we should definitely touch on, is the shade that's been thrown on the legal system is something that is very unbecoming of Britain as a whole, I would say. It's
I want to touch on this, but again, because it's kind of examining the partisan side of this, particularly on this sort of not even just pro-Brexit, because now it seems to be that everyone who was pro-Brexit from the referendum is now hard leave for the most part, whether it be Brexiteer politicians or just the general leave population. They seem to see this as some kind of
grand conspiracy
and sort of extrajudiciary movement. But the way that side of the argument is discussing this, it just smacks of absolute disrespect for the judiciary.
It's interesting, because I think that there is definitely a discussion to be had about what are the roles of the judiciary, the executive and the legislature, and I think there's a stronger argument now than there's ever been to actually have a proper, even if it's a very small part, a written constitution so that these matters aren't decided off the cuff, as it were.
Yeah.
But that is definitely a conversation for another time, when we're not in a crisis. We have the system we have now, and we need to respect and obey whatever the judiciary have demanded, because that's our system.
We're going to go further into the discussion on the language that was used in Parliament this week, particularly starting with the speech from Geoffrey Cox and then going on with responses from the Labour benches. We can go further into that, and I think a lot of this programme is going to be devoted to that. But can I just fucking say how disappointed I am with the fact Parliament was recalled and started sitting, Wednesday?
Wednesday, yeah.
And the whole discussion in Parliament this week has just been about language.
Yeah.
It started off naturally with the proroguing of Parliament, and then sort of addressing Geoffrey Cox, and his misstep in advising Johnson that it would be a legal step to prorogue Parliament for longer than it should be. But all of a sudden, the parliamentary discussion, to this day, this morning, Parliament's not sitting this morning, But throughout the political sphere and throughout media this morning, the discussion is about language used.
Yeah.
Can I just say how fucking disappointing that is when we've got a Brexit plan to discuss?
Yeah, and that was the entire reason why Parliament said it was an unjustified reason to prorogue Parliament in the first place, because they wanted to scrutinise the Brexit deal.
When they've spent 3 fucking days in Parliament literally talking about language.
Yeah, basically talking about their own actions and their own lack of respect and just themselves. Yep. Which is, it just stinks of arrogance from the political class that are known for arrogance in the first place.
Yes, it's arrogance, and we know that the usual political class kind of criticisms of how they view themselves and how they view this place.
Yeah.
But also, it's just fucking time wasting.
Yeah, exactly. Which wasn't that the whole accusation against Johnson in the first place?
Parliament, yeah. And so, no, I'm severely disappointed, particularly on... As much as normally I have kind of issues and bone to pick with the so-called Remain side of the House, just over there kind of... And look, as much as, in big part, the Brexit side of the debate, particularly kind of populist media talk and Leave voters talk about this grand conspiracy in Parliament to stop Brexit, there is a certain amount of MPs in Brexit, a certain amount of MPs in the Parliament that do want to... create obstacles to Brexit. And they openly tell you we want to stop Brexit. It's not quite this grand scheme that people make out to be, but there are members of Parliament that do want to stop this. And I'm actually, as much as I have problems with those politicians, I'm disappointed in the fact that they're just not just pushing past it and pushing past this use of language and just going straight to the crux of the issue.
Yeah, because that was their entire, as I said, that's the entire reason for arguing against
no-deal Brexit.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing, you'll probably see the conversation shift towards that this week.
Hopefully.
Particularly with the SNP, particularly Nicola Sturgeon, being a lot more receptacle to the idea of a Jeremy Corbyn-led caretaker government than she was before the prorogation.
She agreed. Well, she started making noises about that this morning, if I'm correct. Yep. So Nicola Sturgeon, the SNP, has finally agreed. Well, there's always been murmurings about this, but agreed to, if it came to a general election, a joint government, a government of national unity headed by Corbyn.
Yes, and I think the only party that's really blocking that at the moment, or at least having the appearance of blocking it at the moment, is Joe Swinson and the Liberal Democrats, who I'm sure you will agree with this, are just doing it to delay time so they can withdraw as much political advantage out of it as particularly possible.
Exactly that. They know a general election is coming, and they want to be the ones who, when the Tories can't form a government during a hung parliament, then they want to be the second in the say. They want to be the second run, the runners up, and they want to be able to form. They want to be the head of a coalition government
with the Tories.
Whoever it be with, I reckon even Labour, but the problem is, I know Swinson, I've said this before, Swinson wants to be Prime Minister. She's power hungry. So I think if there was going to be a coalition government, I call bullshit on the idea that they would never go into a coalition government with a Corbyn-led Labour.
Oh, yeah,
what I do believe is that if she can help it, if they can help it, it'd be a coalition government with her as Prime Minister.
Wow, that would certainly... Labour would never go for that unless the Lib Dems actually managed to get more seats.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the point I'm making. They came second place in terms of electoral seats.
Overall second place.
And I think that's what they're hoping to aim for. Right. Because the reality is the Lib Dems are not going to come first, and neither are Labour.
No.
The only party that can take the most seats in the next election will be Conservatives, and that's even with the Brexit party nipping at their heels.
That's true, but it's still a very difficult It's still a very difficult path for them to actually get a majority, let alone a majority strong enough for them to get their Brexit deal through easily.
If you're not from the UK, just to explain this, basically we talk about ourselves as if we're a multi-party system or a two-party system at least. Really, in reality, we're a one-party system. There's only really ever one party that wins most elections in this country, and that's the Conservatives. Yeah. They're the only party that can ever command enough seats.
That's definitely been true for the last 40 years, definitely.
Yeah. We had the
exception.
You had the 13-year leadership. You had the 13-year rule of New Labour, but again, that wasn't Labour as we knew it and then know it now. It's not hard left Labour. It was brought to the middle. one foot on the centre left, 1 foot on the centre right. New Labour.
Yeah, well, Labour have always been traditionally the split party, which is why in the last couple of years the Tory party have been the more split party on the issue of Brexit in particular, has been why there's been so much chaos in it, because that party is just not used to not being as united as they normally are.
Yeah, so to explain that, so back in during the years we joined the EU, so in the early 70s, the Conservative Party was made up of sort of two wings. You had the kind of traditionalist protectionists, and then you had the kind of new, what was to come, Thatcher side, ultra capitalist side of the Conservative Party. And then obviously there was a massive split down the middle between the traditional protectionists, which for the most part have gone in the Conservative Party, who did not want to join the EU, and then you had the more kind of slowly liberalising, what I call city autistic capitalist.
More for American listeners, libertarian would be a good word, although it's not as hard.
It's
libertarian.
Not American libertarian.
It's not American libertarian.
It's London libertarian.
Yeah, it's classical liberalism.
Classical liberalism. And that's what's always created a split in the Tory party since 1972, or 73, whatever year it was we joined. Europe has brought down every Conservative leader. It brought down Thatcher.
Every Conservative leader in power.
In power, yes. Sorry, I mean, obviously, I can't count IDS, so...
or William Hague.
William Hague. Most Conservative leaders... Actually, what I was going to say was incorrect. I was going to say most Conservative leaders have ended up being Prime Minister in the last 40 years, but that might not be correct.
No, there was loads in Tony Blair's years that didn't get it.
Well, because who did we have in Blair's years? We had IDS, we had William Hague, we had, obviously, Cameron, who went on...
Yeah, Michael Howard as well.
Oh, Michael Howard, fuck.
He was there for a while. I think everybody else has as well. He's the only Tory leader who hasn't popped up in the Brexit debate thinking about it.
Yeah.
Everyone else has given their 2 cents in.
Jesus. But going back to the point, so basically the point we were making, naturally the Conservative Party is split. Since we've joined, they've been split on both the EU and then the idea of leaving the EU. And then now... over the last few years, particularly with Corbyn coming into power, momentum basically now ruling the party, you have a split between actually it's a three-way split. So you've got what we call Blairite Labour, which was kind of social capitalist Labour from the 90s. You've got old Labour, which was the old hard left, which was kind of semi-communist, which is made up of Corbyn, McDonnell, and then you've got the third one, which is kind of newer, which is less economically driven, more kind of social justice.
That's a very, very young wing of the party at the moment.
Very young wing of the party, but it's kind of got a lot... It kind of blends with the Blairite side a bit more.
Yeah.
The best...
Mainly made up of middle class people.
Yeah. But it blends with the Blairite side, but in reality it's kind of more attached to the Corbyn side.
Yeah.
By way of driving momentum.
Yeah, definitely. And as you said, I don't think they have too strong of feelings, whether they're a social liberal or a socialist Labour Party. It's more to do with
social justice. Really. I'm not using that in the usual kind of derogatory term. I'm using it literally. It's about anti-racism. It's about women's rights. Stuff we all generally agree with, but stuff that if you're just ignoring the economy, then why are you in politics?
Yes. It's also the type of stuff that some Conservative leaders try to pander to poorly. Theresa May tried this at the beginning of her tenure, or at least did so, or at least made the attempt to do so, and it just failed because no one who's of that persuasion, of social justice persuasion, is even going to consider voting for the Conservative Party. Yeah. It's a silly idea from the first place, and it angers more Conservative voters than anything. It's
interesting actually, because the other night, to break the full fall here, 2 nights ago I was around one of our local pubs around here called the Rose and Crown. I actually invited Tom down, but Tom couldn't make it. Yeah. A friend of mine's brother-in-law, who's a young guy that partly runs sort of an independent record label, he lives, funny enough, in Tom's constituency. He literally lives round the corner from this street, literally a 2-minute walk from here. And he asked me, because he's only moved in, I think not that long ago, he's like, who is my local MP who runs constituency, which party? I said it's Labour. It's Ilford North. It's West Streeting. And he said, "Oh yes, good," because I'm of the hard left socialist, and I said, "Well, interesting. That's interesting because one, you don't know much about your own party then, because West Streeting is not hard left.
No, he's very
socialist.
much in the anti-Corbyn wing.
He's very much Blairite, and I've got quite a bit of respect for Streeting to a certain degree. I think he's a bit of a whiner about certain things." But I don't mind Streeting. Streeting's okay. I think he's a good voice of opposition within the Labour Party.
Yeah, and he's still quite a young chap, so I'd imagine that he is going to go quite far if the moderates ever do regain power from Labour.
Yeah, I imagine if there is a moderate cabinet, shadow cabinet, once Labour loses the next election, and they will lose the next election. I don't necessarily see a moderate cabinet coming to place, but a lot of people do. I don't think they're factoring in that Momentum still has hold of the party, and Momentum hates the moderates.
Yeah,
Momentum is doing what it can to get rid of the moderates, including Streeting. They hate Streeting.
Which would be silly to get rid of Streeting from here, because this Ilford North is a swing constituency.
Yeah.
So it was Tory in the 2010 election, but they Labour regained it in 2015. So Wes Streeting is actually the perfect Labour candidate for this area.
Yeah.
So getting rid of him would just be a massive shot in the foot.
Yeah, I mean, to go hard left, if they were to deselect Streeting and then try put in some harder left candidate, unless maybe they were an Asian candidate. Because Ilford's a very Asian area. I mean, this is Ilford North. It's a bit more mixed than Ilford South.
Ilford South is very hard Labour.
Ilford South is hard Labour, hence why Mike Gapes, who was the local MP, stepped down from Labour, because again, a bit more moderate. It talks out anti-Semitism, just like West Streeting, because West Streeting and Mike Gapes are basically like brothers from another generation.
Right.
Both, I think both Jewish MPs, and I think both really calling out Corbyn and the current shadow administration on the anti-Semitism issue. And I've got a lot of respect for Gapes, because Gapes has been around for a long time and has held Ilford South for a very long time.
Yeah.
The reality is, though, once the next election rolls round, he will lose his seat.
As in from Momentum deselecting him then, or effectively?
So he, from what I could tell, Momentum were naturally going to come around to deselect him, so he jumped. He went to Change UK.
Oh, okay.
And obviously they all left. I don't know if I think he might be one of the only ones still with Change.
Because I think most of the ones that are still with Change are of the former Conservative.
But in terms for his own political career, he has made a massive mistake if he wants to hold on to his seat, because. The reality is, Ilford South is so hard Labour.
Yeah.
Naturally, because it's a very Pakistani and Bengali constituency. So yeah, he's made a really bad decision there. He will lose his seat, and I don't know who Momentum is fielding for the Labour leadership in that area.
Well, they could literally put in Trotsky's ghost and they'll still vote for Labour. Yeah. So, I mean, whoever that's why I think you're right when they will put in someone who is very, very hard left, because it's no.
It's either they'll put in someone hard left, or they'll put in someone who generally issues is more ethnic based, because there are quite a few of the left. MPs in the Labour Party that are generally more they're generally more about local issues, particularly at certain ethnic minority issues. So you'll find in Bradford that a lot of the Labour MPs are generally just about local Asian issues, like local, particularly Pakistani issues.
Well, at one point George Galloway was their MP.
Well, exactly, yeah. And so in Ilford South, you'll find that you'll probably see an Asian, like a specifically Pakistani candidate who appeals to kind of local issues there. I don't think he'll necessarily be of the hard left.
Okay.
I think he'll be pretty non-economic.
Right. Okay.
Just like with who's been there for years, Diane Abbott in Hackney, who could not lose her seat for love nor money.
No. But if they do put out there, they'll, I have no doubt, toe the whip line respectively, because most new MPs tend to do that because they don't want to piss off anyone early on in their career.
No, yeah, I mean, no one. If you've been installed by Momentum, you're not going to want to piss them off.
No.
Actually, I mean, I'm gonna devote. We've still got some time, so I think I'm going to devote a little bit of this to the infighting. We've effectively talked about what's going on in Parliament this week. So, the infighting in Labour between Momentum, whoever sticks around Momentum, so the more, as we said, the kind of the ethnic issue based MPs, and then the more kind of the social justice MPs, and again, there's a few more social justice MPs who are actually more on the Blairite. They're generally more on the, for lack of a better term, the Blairite side of the bench, just because for whatever reason they don't really fit in with Momentum. So Jess Phillips, for example, who I really like. Jess Phillips, I think she's a great. She's a great MP. I think she's just got balls. She's a great politician.
She definitely has balls, definitely. She went toe-to-toe with Sargon and won.
Yeah.
Effectively. Yeah. And Sargon has a load of people who would do anything
Benji
for
boy.
him. Yeah.
Well, the problem is, okay, going back to the issue with Parliament this week and talking about use of language, a lot of it actually stems around the fact that G.S. Phillips spoke out in Parliament this week after Johnson made this really clumsy statement that because basically people on the Labour benches were saying, hey, the use of language is what basically killed Joe Cox. Joe Cox
led to the killing of Joe
former
Cox,
late Labour MP who was who a few days before the Brexit referendum was murdered by some kind of far right lunatic.
Screaming Britain first.
Britain first. He shot her and stabbed her.
Yeah, and Jo Cox was a very pro-immigration MP, and she was very pro-Europe, and she was also, as far as I can tell, universally respected by the House as a very good constituency MP.
And she's a very good MP. Who, as I can tell, she was very much of that new base of Labour I was talking about, kind of social justice driven. Which in that part of Yorkshire, you'd think, again, I think it's one of those issues where you can put a donkey in a red rosette and you'd win, because her natural constituents wouldn't be of that social justice ilk.
No. But I think going back to the point about Johnson, was that the exact wording that Johnson said after who was the MP that said the Labour MP?
Kate Sheriff. Right?
Yeah. Kate Sheriff made a very impassionate speech where I think the main point is she hit on a lot of points before she got to the Joe Cox angle, but her main argument was, your rhetoric, Mr. Prime Minister, your rhetoric is raising the temperature to the point where we could see another horrible murder like the one of Joe Cox.
Which actually, I don't think, as much as people have called it hysteric to say so, I don't think she's too far off considering what's happened this week.
Well, with Jess Phillips' office.
For example, because Jess Phillips also stood up after Kate Sheriff and said, I agree. She basically just backed up Kate Sheriff's point. And I think it was the day after she backed up Kate Sheriff's point, her own constituency office was attacked by a lunatic trying to get in and beat everyone up, screaming fascist, traitor.
Yeah, they had to lock him up in the office and go in complete lockdown.
So I do think it's not too far out the realms of possibility that this could happen. Just because there are nut jobs out there.
Yeah, that is the thing. I mean, this is you see this. It's not exactly a parallel scenario, but I think it's worth making the comparison. With when mass shootings happen in America. You generally get them in waves, so particularly if they're motivated by white supremacy. So you saw the mass shooting that obviously happened in Christchurch. Then after that, you had half a dozen people claiming that they were inspired by the mass shooting in Christchurch. So I don't think it's not. We have too much evidence to deny that rhetoric, raising rhetoric,
and that's funny.
Results in that kind of things.
It is cool. Coming from someone who voted Brexit, such as yourself. Normally, people who would take, or people over the last week, people who have always been Brexit voters. They vote Brexit referendum for Brexit referendum. They would normally take the side that the issue with the issue to pick with language in Parliament this week is partisanal, it's hysteric, it's creating an issue where there's no issue.
I think the thing that pisses me off about this whole thing is that the people that for the last 5-10 years, and I'm not sure if you would agree with me on this, but I would say that who have been raising the rhetoric, particularly around the Brexit referendum, were mainly on the Remain side. When it comes to
I don't quite follow you there.
Well, when it comes to calling people racists and calling people...
In all fairness to the MPs in Parliament, most of them, I think they may have made small passing jabs at,
David Lammy compared people to Nazis.
Yeah, that's why I said not all of them.
Yeah.
Because David Lammy, again, is another ethnic-centric MP. He's Tottenham's MP. Again, it's kind of appealing to certain constituencies.
Well, I mean, the thing that was point I was trying to make is that was been my opinion of it, and you can disagree with it or not agree with it. But I have always had a problem with that raising of the temperature, which is now what my quote side.
I think most of calling people Nazis and fascists or bigots who voted Remain mainly has come from outside of Parliament. It's mainly been activists from Momentum. It's been generally more harder left or social justice based activists who are not in Parliament.
No, I would agree with you.
So I would disagree with you a little bit there.
Okay, well, it's certainly the raising of the temperature has been on both sides, and we can and I would say that I would like to turn down the volume and
on both sides,
sides of it, and it's not it's something that the maybe this would be a better way of phrasing it. The more hyperbolic side when it comes to making the voters who actually voted for one side or the other, trying to make them seem like they're stupid or that they're not on. They didn't know what they were voting for. Has generally more come from one side, and now
mainly sort of a condescending tone.
There we go.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that.
But now that is now being flipped, and this has been my main problem with Johnson's grand strategy. Is all the high grounds which were sort of taken by the Brexit referendum, the democratic high ground, but because won the referendum, and the politeness high ground, which the Tories and more Conservatives have normally had, the civility high ground, has been surrendered in the 60 odd days that Johnson has been Prime Minister.
Yes.
Because now what do we argue on a moral level? There's not a lot left.
Well, the problem being is Johnson, who obviously was backed wholeheartedly by the ERG, and obviously is advised by Cummings. I think he's been advised to take on some of the rhetoric and speech that people generally outside of Parliament on the Brexit side, whether it be certain politicians, i.e. Nigel Farage, etc., or even just generally more populist members of the Vote Leave constituency or the media. Certain members of the Leave side in Parliament have started to take up that rhetoric, and I think it's now kind of taken one side of the argument into the gutter a bit. One side of the house, sorry.
It's certainly lowered it on that tone.
And I'll throw Cox into that as well after that speech the other day.
I would say that it's definitely lowered the tone. And there is not as bad, but there is obviously hyperbola when it comes to particularly the term surrender bill, which is
fuck me, I hate that term.
Really,
Can you not be adults about this? And again, it's something that has come from it's specifically come from Farage.
Yeah, Farage came up with it. Yeah.
So again, they're actively adopting language from elements outside of the government, and I think that's dangerous.
Okay.
I do think that's dangerous. When you start adopting, particularly this sensationalist rhetoric, traitors and particularly when you start adopting that rhetoric.
Which is for traitor thing has this is the thing important to say. This hasn't been said by the government.
Not yet.
Not yet. No.
Not yet. But it will get there.
It certainly will if if Jeremy Corbyn becomes a caretaker prime minister. I think that word will be bandied around a lot. Mainly to that side member of the House, mainly directed at the Tory rebels more than.
I really can't. So I mean, the idea of Corbyn becoming a caretaker prime minister, which one, I don't see it happening, and two, the idea of that happening would actually throw the Brexit issue into even more disarray.
Oh yeah.
Just because, well, the problem being, yes, he says he's neutral on it, but in reality, he is a old school socialist. He's an anti-West, anti-capitalist socialist. He will force through a no-deal Brexit if he got his own way.
Oh, you really think that?
Yeah, because, well, I suppose naturally in the past that's what we would have believed, because at the end of the day, he doesn't believe in deals between Corbyn capitalist systems. He doesn't believe in cross-free trade between capitalist systems. You're talking about protecting just-in-time supply lines between companies in transnational companies. Yeah. He doesn't want that.
Well, he might want to do that, but I couldn't see him ever getting the support within his own Labour Party, let alone from the Lib Dems and the SNP, who had to prop up its government.
Yeah, and there'd have to be multiple parties propping up that coalition.
Exactly. So I can't see even Jeremy Corbyn, who is not known for his strategic genius, going down that road.
In the last election, you saw that Labour were behind the Conservatives by 100 seats. To make up that free fall, or that shortfall, would be you'd need multiple parties, because the Lib Dems only have 18 seats, the Greens have 1, the SNP have 12 or 17, something like that. Was it 30? I don't know, but
I think it's about 30.
So I'm thinking the Conservative seats in Scotland. So you're talking 30, 18, so that's 48, and then the Greens have 1, that's 49. Plaid Cymru don't have many, it's 7. So you're talking a massive shortfall. How many parties they'd have to bring in that actually have seats?
It's probably wouldn't.
And that's actually why I don't believe they'd be able to make a coalition.
I think a lot of it would depend on what Joe Swinson tends to do. I would say that's the only block, because no one wants to back a Corbyn government if it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So I think briefly before we go on to the issues overall going on in the state, so we briefly touch on the Labour Party conference.
Yeah, we'll touch on the Labour conference. We've got about 10 minutes to touch on that. Talk about a fucking madhouse of ideas.
And I think Labour can count their lucky stars that the whole Brexit thing has happened this week, because most people have already forgotten about what's happened in the Labour Party conference. Just
for a bit of background, the Labour Party conference was this week. The Lib Dem conference of the week before was pretty boring, with the exception of Swinson just, having some sort of semi-firebrand speech that really didn't mean anything.
Their new Brexit policy, which is basically stating what everybody already suspected they were going to do.
But Labour's conference this week couldn't have been any more different. So they kicked it off by trying to pass a motion put forward by Momentum activist and MP to get rid of the position of deputy leader of the Labour Party, which is a direct call to basically try and sack Tom Watson.
Yeah, and it's important to underline that the deputy leader of the Labour Party isn't an appointed position, it's an elected position by the members.
Yes.
And it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's traditionally been the case that they're from two different wings of the Labour Party.
Yeah.
So when Tony Blair was in charge, they had John Prescott as the deputy prime minister.
Who was the more old hard left. I mean, he was definitely hard in many different ways, but he was more of the old hard left. So that was Blair. That was seen as kind of a compromise and a kind of hand-holding between Prescott and...
Yes.
And Prescott generally was quite liked. I mean, he was taking the piss out of a lot, but...
He was quite a funny man, to be fair.
Yeah. He seemed like a good geezer.
Yeah.
He seemed like he was fun to have a drink with, but... I mean...
There's a famous incident with John Prescott, who, if you haven't seen this, if you're too young or if you're American, look up John Prescott egg.
Yeah. So, this was what, 2001?
It was the first Labour election where they needed to get re-elected.
Yes. Yeah. So, basically, Prescott was out on a campaign trail and someone just throws an egg at him. And instead of doing the usual politician thing, as in Corbyn has done, is just kind of have security back the guy up and back the guy off, and you just kind of go on with it. He battered the geezer.
He just turned around and smacked
because obviously Prescott's not a pussy. He's an old northern, unionist coal miner.
Yeah.
So he's a big bastard, and he just turns around and just starts beating the shit out of this guy. And I don't know who he was an activist for. This guy. No idea.
No, I can't remember. It's been lost to history.
Yeah,
but it's worth a look up if you haven't seen it. Or
Prescott just beats the shit out of this geezer, and I mean the amount of scandals around. I mean, not really any kind of damaging scandals, but I mean,
for anyone damage him in that election.
There was another scandal towards the end of his time in office where he was caught shagging his secretary on his desk. and he's such a fat bastard, he broke the desk. So, the funniest thing about it was an affair scandal because he's married, but he broke. It just turned into a comedy story because he's so fat he broke the desk. But anyway, away from
reminiscing about the unserious times of British politics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we feel a world away from that from the Blairite years.
But just to briefly bring it back to the Labour conference, there was two big policies that they had effectively voted through because Labour parties vote on their policies. One was the abolition of private education, and the second one was some people were calling it open borders, but it's certainly opening the doors a hell of a lot more.
They called it free movement.
Yes,
which is essentially opening the borders.
Yes, free movement, not just from the EU,
but from the world.
Yes, lifting the caps on non-EU immigration and keeping effective a one-way freedom of movement with the EU, because the EU aren't going to give us freedom of movement if we leave the EU, because that's a fundamental freedom of the EU.
Yeah. So this screams one thing to me. To me, it screams that Labour knows it's not winning the next election under any circumstances. So what it's doing, I don't know whether it's be momentum-led or another part of the hierarchy within the party. They're trying to force through during this conference as many kind of momentum, hard left, friendly, both social justice and old school left policies as possible. A kind of semi-Bolshevik policies, i.e., the abolition of not just private schools but private tutoring.
Yeah.
How the fuck does that work?
I didn't even realise it went that far.
No,
private tutoring. That's crazy.
The abolishment of private tutoring because it still puts middle class kids ahead of working. Fuck me. Point being, it screams to me that the Labour Party knows it has no chance of winning the next election. And, so they in the correct usage of the term, and I hate using this term, they are virtue signalling until Corbyn is pushed. Corbyn, when they do lose the next election, Corbyn is obviously steps down, and they will have to probably go to a more moderate leadership again.
Yep, and I agree with you on that, and I think
they're basically having a party until the next election.
Right, and I would say the immigration policy underlines that even more than the education policy for the simple reason that Labour are going to have a very difficult time in the north, in the very hard leave areas in the north. They were always going to have a difficult time, but they've made it 10 times worse by going with this immigration policy, because the main reason, particularly in the north, that they voted for Brexit was immigration.
But the funny thing with that, I mean, it is such a bombastic fucking and out there policy. There is no country on earth that has complete free movement of all people. It's unprecedented.
It is completely it's even like a lot of Democratic politicians in America are being called out for their open borders policy. This policy makes their supposed open borders policy look like Donald Trump's wall. It's nuts.
But that's what makes me fail to believe that they actually think they're going to win the next election. I do believe this is all just kind of it's a last push at virtue signalling until they have to replace Corbyn with a moderate.
To try and solidify the move to the left as much as possible.
But then again, saying that, I do have issues even with my own prediction there, because at the end of the day, momentum basically runs Labour at the moment, and I can't see momentum installing anyone. I can see them... Well, this is where momentum's going to have problems. Momentum generally, with the exception of the snakehead of momentum, is generally led by people who are pro-EU, pro-Remain. But the problem is, anyone who momentum would want to put in as a hard left candidate is generally going to be anti-EU.
If they're going to be of the old school.
Yeah.
Who would you say would be the favourite at the moment? Because I can't see someone like McDonald coming in, because McDonald just has too much of a sort of...
McDonald is, if you basically took Corbyn and then added a good touch of more Soviet Soviet communism to him.
Yeah, and he's a lot more of a traditional politician as well. He comes across more of a traditional politician, and he quite frankly he comes across as a smarter and more should we say nefarious.
Put it this way, he is to Corbyn what Cheney was to Bush.
Yeah, that's a very good comparison.
Essentially, he is the puppet master. And who do I see? And I think we literally had this discussion last week, if I'm not wrong. Who do I see post Corbyn being the next Labour leader? I've got no fucking clue.
Okay.
Oh, hang on. We were going to vote until Parliament was recalled, we were actually going to devote an episode to this.
We were. Maybe when British politics comes down, it'll probably be the leadership election before it comes down.
Because we're literally in an interesting place now where I've got no fucking clue who would lead the next Labour shadow cabinet. Because again, Momentum is not going to install any Blairites or centrists. But the problem is with that is then who does it leave? It either leaves a social justice politician, and in big part a lot of those guys are actually more on the Blairite side of things. They generally tend to sit more on that side, so there's a bit of a block of the more social justice, MPs that Momentum won't touch. And because a lot of them generally actually came out against Corbyn and Momentum in the anti-Semitism row. And then maybe it might be one of the because again, if they're not going to vote in one of the hard left, then it might be one of the they might put forward one of the more kind of specifically ethnic kind of appealing ethnic group appealing MPs we spoke about earlier. Someone like Abba's too old and too tainted. I don't think they're going to push Abba. But then again, said that about Corbyn. Maybe Lammy. I don't. As far as those politicians go, I don't mind Lammy, but I think he said some stupid things in the last few years.
I think Lammy will be even more tainted with the
moderate
public.
He'll definitely be polarising.
Yeah. He's very much He's actually weirdly he's probably the most tweet happy politician who's in the public eye.
Yeah.
Which is compare that with Boris, who sometimes gets compared to Trump. His tweets are nothing like Trump's. His tweets are quite clearly run by someone in Number 10, not by Boris. Whereas David Lammy does quite clearly have control of his own Twitter account.
Yeah,
which is a bad move by a politician in any circumstance.
So it's a weird one. I really can't see who would be the next Labour leader. For some reason, Lammy sits in my head because again, as long as Momentum has charge of that party, I can't. I don't know if it's going to be an old crusty lefty. I can't see it being any of the guys of the sort of Blairite bloc, which includes some of the social justice MPs, i.e. someone like Joe Cox, who would still be with us, someone like Jess Phillips. I spoke to Kate Sheriff.
I think Jess Phillips might have a good chance of that, to be honest.
I would hope, actually, it'd be Jess Phillips, in all honesty. I'm not a Labour voter, but, if there was going to be anyone... But is Phillips seen as a too new a figure?
She might be, but she's done very well on the public sphere as well, and I think that might be what a lot of people are looking for. I suppose
she's a relatively young woman, so that helps. But also, I think what doesn't go in her favour on the left side of things, and again, knowing a lot of people's ideal on the hard left and Momentum side of things, when she argued with the very kind of conservative Pakistani community in her own constituency in Birmingham over the issue with the school teaching, the primary school teaching LGBT tolerance, because she clashed with that Muslim community, that Pakistani Muslim community. I think that kind of tainted her to the hard left and the social justice side of things.
Okay.
So I know a lot of people on the hard left that don't like her because of that.
Well, it's interesting the whole issue with the Birmingham schools is because I would imagine that really did split the social justice supporting Labour people, because you effectively have two aspects of the intersectional coalition going at it.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have the LGBT side of things, which naturally. That intersectional social justice side of the Labour Party would be very much defensive of, but yet those same politicians are very defensive of Muslim communities, and I suppose they should be defensive of Muslim communities, but the problem was they were going after, essentially, or they were trying to discriminate against one of their other big blocs.
Yeah.
So it's I think a lot of Labour MPs stuck out of it. But Jess Phillips couldn't because it was our constituency.
Well, I think in particular that one is that most people would probably, most Labour supporting Labour MPs would more naturally probably side with the LGBT community on that issue. But it's interesting you say it's one of their natural bases, because even though LGBT people generally do vote more left-leaning, it's nowhere near as heavy as the
Pakistani community.
Exactly. So I think that's probably why it was so...
particularly in Birmingham.
Yes.
I mean, Birmingham, to be a Labour MP in Birmingham, and because obviously there's multiple constituencies, but I think it's specifically her constituency of Birmingham, which is Birmingham Yardley, if you are to argue with the local Pakistani community anywhere in Birmingham, you're kind of potentially fucked.
Yes. They have a very tight hold on the selection.
So it will be interesting to see what happens to Phillips in the next election.
It will be.
But I suppose we're moving on now.
I think we have possibly we've not talked to death because you could never talk the subject to death. But I think this is a good time to move on to the other major political story of the week, which happens to be from across the pond. We've made a couple of references to how quiet American politics has been over the last couple of weeks. Well, that changed.
Blown out of the water.
That changed this week. So we're going to do what is quite frankly going to have to be a brief review of what happened over there. And first of all, I'd like to sort of go through the characters, as it were. So you've got, so most people have had a little bit about it, but the first person who's probably you've got to mention is Viktor Shorkin, who is the Ukrainian prosecutor. He was fired in 2016 for corruption, although one of the whole premises of the scandal is that it is alleged by Trump that he was actually fired because he was looking into Joe Biden's son, a company that Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, was working on in 2016, whilst Joe Biden was obviously the vice president of the United States. Then you have the guy who I think we could do a whole episode of this guy, quite frankly, Volodymyr Zelensky, who is the Ukrainian Prime Minister, recently elected Ukrainian Prime Minister, who was formerly a comedian who used to play the parody of a president on. Sorry, he's a president, not Prime Minister.
Can I say it speaks words that an ex-Soviet Prime Minister was a politician? Because there is just a lot of comedy in that side of the world in regards to politics. Fuck me. But he stands on an anti-corruption platform.
He does, which is interesting because obviously he would probably be against this prosecutor who is, I should mention, known for being very light-handed with the Ukrainian oligarchs. Yep. And Zelensky he's quite pro-USA, pro-EU, but he's not as rabidly anti-Russian as the previous administration.
Petro Poroshenko.
Yes, who was effectively installed during what is now seen as a coup. It was effectively...
It wasn't a fucking coup. I suppose it was. No, it kind of was. I mean, it was a...
One could argue it was more just... I think
it became justified once the Berkat, which was the Ukrainian Special Forces, started shooting protesters.
Exactly.
I think that's when it became justified.
Yes.
But I think maybe if it was just that, maybe it wasn't justified.
Yeah. If anyone hasn't seen the documentary on Netflix about that, it's definitely worth a watch.
Which one?
I think it's something on fire.
Okay.
I can't remember the exact name of it, but if you just type in Ukraine to
Kiev on fire,
it might be a Kiev on fire. Yeah,
okay.
It's a brilliant first-handed documentary. It's all obviously in Ukrainian subtitled, but definitely recommend it. So the next character in this scenario, it is bloody complicated. This thing would have to be the Rudy Giuliani, who's former mayor of New York. Now is Trump's personal lawyer, who has gone to Ukraine to see if he can dig up any dirt on the whole Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, Viktor Shorkin scandal. The last person who we should mention is the whistleblower, who we don't know who that is at the moment.
Right.
What we do know about them is that they are a CIA officer, that they want to testify in front of Congress, although they would like to do it anonymously, which seems crazy in my opinion.
I sense an assassination.
Another important point is that this man wasn't, or that woman was not involved in the conversation that the phone call that this whole scandal.
Well, do we know that for a fact? Because did he claim to say he was?
No, the whistleblower report that was submitted through the proper channels was mentioned that he had heard these things from other people.
So that's where Trump came in saying it was second-hand information.
Hearsay, yes.
Yeah.
And Trump, and this has not been proven, but Trump has accused him of being a political actor, which Trump is always going to do. And then, so we get to the sort of meat and potatoes of the scandal, which all revolves around...
Sorry, just talking about Ukraine and meat and potatoes. Sorry.
No pun intended there, surely. But This sort of scandal all revolves around a phone call between President Trump and the aforementioned Ukrainian Prime Minister, which starts off, as all these political diplomatic phone calls do, with the smaller party kissing the larger party's arse for quite a long time, until it gets to the issue of the aid, because Trump has been, ironically, withholding aid from Ukraine. Now, he would maintain that he was doing that to try and shore up anti-corruption things, for the same reason that Biden had supposedly not had held up the aid previously.
Yeah. And just for context, anyone who doesn't know much about Ukraine is constantly ranked as the most corrupt country in Europe. It's a huge, overblown government and state that doesn't necessarily what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't cooperate with central government all too well. It's a big country. You've got kind of nationalistic and ethnic interests in different areas, so you don't necessarily all cooperate with the centralised Kiev government too well. And there's just a lot of skimming of funds and I mean the usual post-Soviet shit.
Well, yeah, exactly. I think there's a lot of different angles, and like a lot of the countries around there, there's obviously the left-right divide, but a much more bigger divide is the pro-EU, pro-Russia divide. So eventually, after the platitudes are all dealt with, Trump brings up the issue of USA support and says that he's been doing a lot better than the Europeans, even name drops Angela Merkel, and saying they haven't given you as much support as we had. Zelensky thanks him for his support and asks for more, and hints that he would love to buy more javelins from the Americans, which he can only do.
Is that the missile system?
Yes, the missile system. He would love to buy more missiles from America, but he didn't say this part, but it's implied they kind of need the aid that they're currently holding up. So it's at this point where Trump says the key word, which is being put up by a lot of people, because he actually uses the phrase, "we'll need to do a favour," which sounds like a quid pro quo, but which would definitely be an impeachable offence, any kind of quid pro quo. But you could also read it because he goes on to then talk about a completely different thing. He doesn't talk about Biden after he talks about the favour thing. He's actually referring to what is effectively a conspiracy theory that it was actually a Ukrainian company who false flagged the Democratic Party when instead of the Russians trying to hack them. And he was trying to get some information about that.
Right.
Which, as I say, is not verified and it's just at this point a conspiracy theory. Yeah, exactly. Which again, ironic. Zelensky sort of says, we can look into that, without actually saying we can look into it. But then Zelensky brings up Rudy Giuliani, who, as we mentioned before, was talking about the whole Hunter Biden situation. Now, in a couple of paragraphs later, Trump explicitly mentions the whole Hunter Biden situation. So this is really the crux of what the Democrats have to hold their hat on when it comes to whether it's an impeachable offence. Was the word quid pro quo, and you have to kind of connect the dots between the conversations, but if you just read it verbatim, or at least the transcript, which isn't really a transcript, it might not seem like he actually asked him, hey, I want you, if we're going to release the aid, once you give us the dirt on Biden. That sentence never actually happened, but you could read into it if you were giving it an unfavourable reading to Trump, which obviously anyone who doesn't like Trump is going to give.
Yeah, so predictions. We know as long as it is passed by by Congress, this inquiry will go ahead. Well, the inquiry is going ahead. It's about impeachment.
Yes, Nancy Pelosi has already started the impeachment inquiry.
Which is made up of, 6 committees?
It's currently being made up of a load of different committees that are actually looking into completely separate things, including the previous Trump-Russia scandal. And now Nancy Pelosi's effectively taken control and is now going to whip this entire thing, and has taken it under basically an umbrella committee that is going at. And a side note on this, there was much scandal because they could actually have drafted the articles of impeachment as quickly as the end of October. Which, coming from British politics, is like, oh, that's going to take you a month. Well, that's like Brexit Day for us. That's hardly a crisis if you're going to take a month to do it.
Well, exactly, I mean, they're not really big. The US Congress Boris is not big on moving things quickly, so impeachment
is designed that way.
I think it's pretty much, we know that this impeachment hearing will take us at least up to the next general election.
And that is what the Democrats are counting
So we're
on.
talking over a year.
They will drag it out for as long as possible. For a couple of different reasons, and depending on your opinion on Donald Trump, you're gonna have this. But I think the main reason is something that everybody can guess. It's just to make him look as bad as possible going into the 2020 election.
It's interesting, just because I don't know who would win from having, or who loses from having this go up to the next general election, because you'd think the Democratic side of the House would want to get this done before the next national election.
They would certainly want to get it passed within the House by the next general election, but they don't want to do it straight away. If they did it in even January or February times, then people will forget. Because of a 24-hour news cycle, everything goes quickly. They will risk it being forget. I think, but what they would like to do it in is once the Democratic nominee has been selected, so probably next summer, then they pass it off to the Senate and they force for Republicans to vote against it.
Is the next Democratic, not the Democratic nominee? Is he not being elected till next summer?
Effectively,
For fuck's sake! I always forget how. Well, I don't forget, but how early campaigning starts in the American system.
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
The campaign for next election has already been going the last couple of months.
Yeah.
And yet we're...
Or the last year.
Yeah, last year. And we're now, a year and 2 months out from the next election?
Yeah. I mean, I was listening to old Benny Boy Shapiro yesterday, and he said, it's only 13 months away! Only 13 months away!
We never pick the opposition's... Unless there's already one in place, if we are choosing a new opposition leader, we never choose it until, a few months before the election?
Yeah, I mean,
how long was it until Corbyn thought he's a couple of years until Corbyn thought his first election, but...
Although we kind of do it in reverse. We always select our leaders unless they get taken down by a scandal just after the previous election.
Just after the election, when you say, okay, you lost, fuck you, we're choosing someone next.
So they have a lot of time to build up their party to what they think they're going to be for the next election.
That would just be frustrating fucking dealing with that system where you start campaigning effectively 2 years before the election.
Yeah. And the vast majority of the candidates for the Democratic nomination know they're not going to get anywhere near it. They're running for different reasons.
Okay, we like to hold our head high and go, we only have 5 weeks. In reality, the campaign in the UK lasts a good 6 months.
Yeah,
but
it's certainly
at least it's only fucking 6 months. At least it's still fresh.
Yes, I mean, effectively for particularly ever since we've had the Fixed Term Parliament Act. The 2015 election went on for ages, it felt like. But 2017, not so much, because that was a snap election.
I was literally, a month and a few weeks?
Yeah, I mean, Theresa May wanted to do it as quickly as possible
I remember sitting on a plane, getting ready to take off, when that news come through that she had called a general election.
Yeah, I was in Benidorm, actually, on the toilet. I was like, holy shit, it just came up, and I was like, God.
I was essentially sitting on a toilet. I was sitting on the Ryanair flight. So, but fuck me, I really hate the American electoral process.
It would just get. I'd imagine it's one of the main reasons why Americans just don't pay attention to their politics that much.
Because it's constantly going on.
Yeah.
You'll elect a new president, or you'll win a second term, and then all of a sudden campaigning starts again. What?
Yeah, it just gets so tiring. It is just so tiring. But that is effectively the scandal that's happened in America this week, and no doubt it will be talked about for a long time, but it could end up backfiring on the Democrats, just like the Trump-Russia thing ended up backfiring.
I honestly, this is my prediction, and I'm making it a long way in advance, but I don't think it will pass Congress. No, it'll probably pass Congress, it won't pass the Senate.
Yes, that's the key thing here.
Just because the Senate is too Republican.
It's too Republican, and also they have to have a 2/3 majority for the Senate to be impeached. And that's never happened in the history of America. No one has ever got an impeachment through both houses.
Because if you think from where we were pre-Trump being elected, where you actually had quite a divided Republican Party in terms of how they looked at Trump, you had a lot of kind of traditional conservative politicians who were really anti-Trump.
The never-Trumpers, as they're known.
The never-Trumpers. And, I mean, they've all kind of fallen in line.
A lot of them have. A lot of them basically said once Trump got the nomination and once Trump won the presidency in particular, like, okay, we'll give him a chance. And he's governed more conservatively, or at least attempted to govern more conservatively, than George W. Bush did.
Which is interesting for, again, what I'd call him a city autistic, but he's a bit more of a polarising character than that. He's generally someone who is just more about, free markets and low regulations and someone...
Yeah, lower taxes.
If you were to take like his actual political beliefs away from the kind of populist rhetoric he shoved onto it to get elected, naturally it falls in line with the likes of like Ken Clarke and Vince Cable over here.
Yeah, there's only one policy where he really has gone, a couple of policies where he's really gone against that and gone actually for what he campaigned on. The big one is obviously tariffs.
Yep.
And the second one, which has been more of an executive action thing, has actually been criminal justice reform.
Yeah.
Where he's been reaching across the aisle, not very successfully, but trying to reach across the aisle to try and get that done, which has not been very popular with the base, but they're not going to abandon him over that.
No, it's not a big enough issue.
No.
The only thing that's going to see any kind of drop of support from that side is if he breaks any of the promises that he gave that got him in power, i.e. something like the wall.
Yeah, if he goes, we're not actually going to build the wall now. We don't like that idea anymore. That would not go down well.
It would not go down well. And the reality is they're not building that wall.
No, but the thing is, it's an interesting thing because I did say a few years ago that if Trump doesn't get the wall built, he might have a hard time getting re-elected. However, I actually now changed my mind on that and think he can go up there and say the Democrats are stopping us building the wall.
Trump actually gave away this week that most of the wall is not being built, but he tried to spin it in saying we don't need a big chunk of the wall because a lot of the border is made up of inaccessible terrain. So that was basically him saying we're not building the wall. We're only building 500 miles of it, which is nothing.
It's nothing, and they're doing that with Pentagon money, not through legislation.
Yeah.
Which has gone through the courts, and the courts have said that's fine, which is interesting.
500 miles of wall on a border that I predict is many thousands. Well, I predict at most is 3,000 miles.
I think it's about 3,000 miles, yeah. I think a lot of it is the Rio Grande, which we obviously don't need a wall for that.
No.
But...
look, again, I don't believe in this wall, mainly not because of any kind of social justice thing. I just see it as useless. People are going to come through anyway.
Yeah, I mean, what do people do in this country when they need to come through?
They get on the back of a lorry.
They get on the back of a lorry, or... on boats.
Yeah.
There's two massive fucking oceans either side of you, lads. Just go on boats around you.
Because do you know in Southern California on the border between San Diego and Tijuana, there was already a wall anyway. It was a very large fence, barbed wire, electrical that.
Yes.
Have you ever actually seen the wall, the fence, go out into the sea? It doesn't go particularly far.
No,
you could easily just go round it on a boat.
Yeah. I mean, you can't have it all going all the way to bloody Asia. So that's what's going to happen. You've seen that particularly in the Mediterranean. It's just one of those unfortunate sad facts of life that there will be people who will do anything and will even increase the danger levels
of their own health and safety to get into somewhere they see as a promised land.
So I agree with you that on principle that it is more of a waste of money than anything.
It's a huge waste of money that got him elected.
Yeah. Which for someone standing on a Republican ticket is very strangely ironic.
We here in the UK, we are a country surrounded by water, and what is it, like 26 miles between here and the closest part of France, if not even closer, and that's not a massive feat. Yeah, we have a lot of illegal immigration in this country. We are still one of the biggest countries to take, not to take in, but we have like any big Western state, we have illegal immigration, and again, we don't have any land borders with anyone.
And so we have the same reason for most how most people become illegal immigrants in this country is the same reason across America, and I would imagine it's the same reason that most countries have, which is people come here on a holiday visa,
in a visa,
and then overstay their visa.
Yeah, exactly.
So how are you going to stop that from happening?
So the war is nothing but symbolic.
Yes, exactly.
It's a waste of money. It's a symbolic waste of money.
But my God, does it not feel good for a load of people to keep shouting, "Build that wall, build that wall"? It rallies people up, and I think that actually, as I said, I've changed my mind on this, and I think it's actually going to be a boost for them because people will still believe, well, if we vote them in again, they'll give them the wall this time.
I mean, how the fuck do you get to a place where after 4 years you haven't you in no way have delivered on your campaign, your main campaign promise, and yet people would still be behind you.
That's American politics, and because there's 35% of the country that will vote red or vote blue, whatever happens.
I think for now we're going to sort of leave the issue with basically this impeachment inquiry, just because there's not enough detail yet, really.
No, I think
nothing's happened.
Yeah, we've gone through what has been released, and I think the listeners can make their own mind up on what they think of that.
We've gone well over an hour. Right, Tom, predictions for the week ahead.
For English politics, well, we've got the Tory Party conference coming up.
I thought you were a One Nation Conservative. British politics.
We are British politics, yeah. Slip of a tongue there, Freudian slip. But we do have the Tory Party conference, which could end up being politics being on pause, or it could end up being a massive shit show if Labour and the Remain side try to implement new legislation.
Am I right in saying the Tories' conference is next week?
It is, yes.
It is.
And because the House denied the Tories a recess, which they requested for this conference, which means there is the potential of some MPs being in Manchester whilst if they vote to take control of the House again. Oh my God,
it's going to be silly season. Can you imagine the amount of legislation that's going to be forced through?
That's the problem.
Ooh, I didn't think of this.
Well, this is the thing, because if they try and do that, then they'll lose that democratic high ground that they've just gained.
Okay, then I suppose that's an argument for a lot of MPs not going to the conference this year.
They have to have special permission from
not to go.
10. Yeah, they've been told that you should, if you're going, go on the Sunday, which is the day that Parliament is.
What grounds are there? What grounds are there for any kind of block of legislation making it to the Speaker?
Well, they can't. They can't. The government can't block legislation. Otherwise,
no, the government can't. But
you mean the Speaker? Well, they voted to not have a recess. So John Bercow, I'm not a massive fan of his, but
this could be a very interesting week.
It could be. There's been rumours around that they might even try and lower the voting age during this week
to 16. Woo. That's interesting.
Which I think is a topic which deserves discussion, and I'm actually open to that have been happening. But I do think it's something that
legislation in house just means that essentially you're just putting forward the motion to do so in the future. So it's not anything to.
They got past the Ben Act pretty damn quickly.
No, yeah, true.
So I don't think that they'll do it because, as I said, they've just gained the parliamentary and fair play ground from Boris Johnson, and I think they'd be stupid to give.
They would look like hypocrites, but it isn't like anyone in any party or any bloc in the House has never looked hypocritical before.
It feeds. It's true, but it feeds so much into the people versus party parliament.
Particularly if you're gonna start forcing through legislation which generally is going to be not liked by the type of people who voted Brexit. It's again going to come. It's again going to be Parliament versus the people.
Exactly. So if anything, you would just be giving Dominic Cummings a big gift.
Yeah, and that is whether it be anything Brexit related, which in all honesty I don't know how much there is for them to pass.
They've passed the Ban Act, unless they want to. I don't think they can really do any more on that apart from, and because if they did try, and I think this is very unlikely, but if they did to try and make it move to lower the voting age, then that would be definitely seen as a Brexit related thing because young people generally very much pro.
So essentially, next week, unless there's a load of special permission given, you're going to have essentially one half of the House empty.
Effectively, that could end up being the case. But I think most Tory MPs will go on the Sunday. There'll be a lot of information on the Sunday. Boris will be there on the Wednesday because we already know he's not going to do.
Because again, if you're not from the UK, the reason that's important is because is important because the only party is actually of the right in any way in the House is the Conservatives. Yeah. So if you've got a whole half of the House where everyone's from centre left onwards. Mm-hmm. That it could be a very interesting week.
It could be. It could be, as I say, it's either going to be.
I know you mentioned the DUP, but then the DUP have 10 seats, so
not very important.
Yeah.
But it's as I say, it could if Labour decide not to go down that route and not to put the legislation through, it'll be a very boring week. Apart from the speeches given in the Tory Party conference, which are going to be boring anyway because we know what they think. Or it could be another very, very interesting week in British politics.
I don't know about you, but I don't predict anything much happening in regards to the Trump scandal, just because we're too early in the inquiry.
I think a lot of the facts have come out now, and a
Yeah.
lot of people will be doing a lot of backroom manoeuvring, and will be waiting until the articles of impeachment can be drafted up.
Okay.
So this month is going to be, it will be mentioned in the media a lot, but until those impeachment hearings start, it's not going to move forward that much, unless we know who the whistleblower is, because that could also be a massive revelation.
Right, I'm going to sign off because I'm desperate for a piss. See ya.
See you later.